go. Hello, welcome in. It's the Wrestling Mat. Coming off of the busiest wrestling day in a while? I think so. I believe that is the case. Come on in. What's going on? Shout out. Delayed goats. Grats, you are first. Or maybe you're a goat. I don't know. God, I hate that term. Everybody can't be a goat. Greatest of all time is one. Where did that even come from? Why am I talking about that? We have a lot to get to today. Welcome into the Wrestling Mat. I'm Matt Camp. Two shows last night. Two different programs to break down. Here's what we're going to do today, because there's so much to talk about. If we are live with me right now, it's 1 p.m. Eastern. Is our first of two shows today. Two shows? Yes, two shows today. So here's what's going to happen today. We're going to be live here, breaking down Dynamite, all things AEW, for the first part of today. Then, if you're a Matt member, you're getting tomorrow's episode early. You're going to get it right after this. You want to become a Matt member? Head over to thewrestlingmatshow.com. Become a member, because here's one of those members-only videos you're getting first. Right after we finish this show, start a new stream up, and we're going to break down NXT. We're going to get right into that after the first show. Everybody else will get that tomorrow. Please subscribe where you get your podcast. Subscribe to thewrestlingmatshow.com for free. Turn on those notifications, because who knows when I'll go live. If you're watching us live right now for the Dynamite Breakdown, for the Go Home to Wrestle Dream show, we're going to talk about, hey, you want to get involved? How about a Super Chat? Super Chats really help support the show. Love to have you there. Hey, I saw our good friend Nerdy Dude post his Wrestling Mat shirts today, because those are now available at prowrestlingtees.com/thewrestlingmat. And if you're a Mat member, you get discounts on those Wrestling Mat shirts. But Nerdy Dude, shout out to you and everything you have done here for us. The top supporter, I would say, of the Wrestling Mat, and already has his Wrestling Mat shirts. Go get yours at at prowrestlingtees.com/thewrestlingmat. So thanks everybody for being here. Let's see what you got to say in the chat. NXT first, second stream will be about Dynamite first. Second stream will be about NXT for Matt members. Everybody else will get that episode tomorrow. So Wrestle Dream is just a few days away. Also, I have a little tease. I will be discussing AEW a bit more in the coming days. Nothing to do with AEW, the company, but something else I'll be doing as relates to AEW in the coming days. I'll hopefully be able to announce that very soon. No, not working there, but something in relation to talking about AEW. So keep an eye out for that. Something else that I think a lot of you guys actually help make possible by supporting the Wrestling Mat. So make sure you keep an eye out for that. I'll make sure everybody knows about that very, very soon. So Wrestle Dream is just a few days away. Different week, as Tony noted, on TikTok. A return to TikTok after 2 years, but Tuesday, Dynamite, title Tuesday. That's how the schedule went this week. And, of course, NXT being on CW at the same time. Now, I'm sure at some point here in the next couple hours, the ratings will break, and we'll see whatever it is. I don't think it matters all that much. I don't think either show made it a massive attempt to, like, beat the other. Sure, Randy Orton, which we will get to in the second episode of the day coming up after this. Randy Orton was, of course, announced for NXT, main evented the show. We'll see what the ratings look like in terms of keeping that viewership to wait for Randy at the end of the night. Jey Uso was involved. We'll get into that, of course, on the second episode of the Wrestling Mat today. But for AEW, they, Tuesday night show, title Tuesday. But something that wasn't different is how they opened the show, and something they have done a lot since All Out. That is a Jon Moxley promo. Now, there it is. That's the imagery we are used to now seeing to open up the show. These promos have made me pay attention. These promos open the show in a different way. We went through, 6-8 weeks of MJF's music opening the show? This is, and we've seen Moxley open the show before this gimmick, with Wild Thing and all that. These promos, and as our great friend Tom Green from WCW Deep Cuts noted, it is such a tonal change when you go from Big Bang Theory and whatever bad joke they make to a Jon Moxley promo. And It is a stark difference. I like them. I like them a lot. I'll talk about that more in a second. I wonder how people feel about that. Do you take notice even more because it is so different from what was just on TV? Do you take notice more because he makes you pay attention? Is it the way, does that capture your attention more because it opens the show? And I'm sure everybody watches differently, and there is a thought of what's going to be eye-catching as people are looking around. I think people know, hey, Dynamite's on, I'm going to go watch it now. I certainly sit down that way, whether I'm watching it live or on delay or whatever it may be. But, okay, it's 8 o'clock. I'm paying attention no matter what. Here's Moxley. And this was Mox by himself. This was not Pac, and this was not Marina, and this was not Claudio, standing around him. This is a promo that they are clearly putting more effort into. And I will say this, that's okay. I can't stress it enough. I have said it about AEW. I have said it about NXT. You have to separate your top tier from everybody else. And that means more time. That means more promotion. That means more appearances on the show. That means consistent appearances on the show. That means no worries about getting time cut. That they are first and foremost. Well, when you open the show with Jon Moxley, you're making people pay attention right away. You're saying this is important. And it is not a typical promo, and nor should it be. It is not shot in that way. It looks different than everything else. I am very 50-50. I think music can be almost goofy and take away from sinister promos if it's too much. And every company has been guilty of that. I think it seems overproduced when you put music, especially if just the music hits wrong. What they have done, though, what the Moxley promos is use that same sinister music that builds. It doesn't overtake the promo. It's the right kind of background sound. It sets the tone. It sets the mood. And Moxley right now, whether you believe that he's taking and borrowing and being inspired, by that movie, his words are very pointed. His words, he's very focused. I can tell that he's into this. If I speak this from an analyst standpoint, if I'm looking, Mox is in on this. Mox has got his fingerprints on it. He's not delivering somebody else's words. This is from his brain. Which, if you don't know, I know he's married with a child. That guy likes a lot of wrestling and likes to look at different things and take from different things. And I remember having a conversation with Renee years ago, and I had said something about how do you like watching like Japanese wrestling? She's like, oh my God, it's on all the time. And I don't listen. They've had a child since then and all that stuff. That was just a funny conversation. Like I love the idea of Renee being made to watch all like old Japan or something. That's a fun thing to me. And she's the best. And she's like, oh my God, yeah, you watch it all the time. And that was 5 years ago. This is when we were both in WWE. But this is how Moxley's brain works. And I can tell he has something to sink his teeth into. And there is a almost hyper fixation on his motive. And at the same time, I don't know what he's even saying, if that even makes sense. He comes across as militant. He comes across as someone who is going to carry out the plan no matter what. And I have tried to figure out, and I think they've done a great job blurring the lines. And I think he's done a great job of blurring the lines. Is Jon Moxley carrying out someone else's orders? Is Jon Moxley answering to someone above him? And I don't mean like a god or a higher power. Is someone else delivering this to him, and he is the soldier carrying it out? And he has his crew with him that he was trusted to put together. And I know that people have made a connection. Is it Shane McMahon? maybe that will be the case. Or is Jon Moxley doing this because he's the only one who can? He's the one who's been here for 5 years. He's the one who's surveyed the landscape, who's been to the top, who's been knocked out by injuries, who's had friends, who's had enemies, who's had friends that became enemies and vice versa, who has seen everything and realizes, based on the words he's saying, that if he wants to create his vision of what pro wrestling and the landscape of AEW should be, then he has to be the one to carry it out. Now, the words of Moxley, where I get the real heel tone of it, as I talk about often, is heels have to have shades of gray in their truth. Jon Moxley can say he didn't want to do this to Bryan Danielson. He could say it hurt him to have to carry all this out, but it's what has to be done. That's manipulation. And that's what I think part of this character is. It's manipulation. Just like they tried to manipulate Wheeler Yuta. Clearly that didn't work out, and it got taken out on Yuta last night. Did he manipulate Claudio and Pac into realizing, hey, what we are doing is not enough? What we have done, Claudio, in the Blackpool Combat Club, the mission has failed. It's been dead. And Pac, you know it. I respect you. You've had your own partners. How has that really worked out? But we all are on the same wavelength. We all have the same philosophy about pro wrestling. We all have the same philosophy about all of this. And there's manipulation in that. They haven't had to explain all that. That's kind of assumed. Marina Shafir being by Moxley's side, being that heater. She's never meant more in pro wrestling than she does right now. And I mean that including the stuff she did with the Four Horsewomen. She hasn't wrestled. And I say this quite often. Just because you're not wrestling doesn't mean that you are not important to the show. Rhea Ripley was out for 100-something days a couple years ago when she was getting hot. She's on. She's booked. She's involved. She's consistently featured. Marina Shafir has mattered more. Just by association. She's not, and you've booked her strong, and that's what I come back to with this entire group. Think about how this group started. This group started in the most vivid, vile, violent, murderous way possible. Jon Moxley walked in the ring with a bag and put it over Bryan Danielson's head. And I know people had issue with that, and I understand that. Because it happened on the same night where Hangman and Swerve did everything. And it all got lumped together. Oh, well, they use a syringe, and they use a bag over somebody's head, and oh my God, what are they doing? I think you have to look at them as two separate things. And believe me, I am one to say that you have to be careful about what you book somewhere on the show versus somewhere else because you don't want them to take away from each other. And maybe in a better timed situation, Hangman and Swerve have their cage match on a different night from when Jon Moxley puts a bag over Bryan Danielson's head. Sure. But the point of putting that bag over Danielson's head was to make a complete turn and a meaningful turn on what was a lukewarm group of big stars, because that's what Blackpool Combat was. The Blackpool Combat Club had star power, and they were all over the place in terms of who they were. Claudio said it yesterday. It seems like we were kind of running through the motions. Whether he was, and as always, I say this, anytime you see a wrestler do an interview, it's not always necessarily going to be the truth. They will always control what they're saying. They will always control what the narrative as much as they can be. Smart ones will. They make you guess. Were they running through the motions? Perhaps. Does it sound good for Claudio to say that in the grand scheme of things, where he stands right now with Moxley going up against Danielson on Saturday? Yeah. Does it play to their philosophy of maybe even they were doing things wrong? Moxley put that bag over Bryan Danielson's head to set the tone. And it's all about how they followed that up. They have kept that tone up. They are not looking for an ounce of cheers. They are not looking for sympathy. They are taking what they need to take. They are carrying out what they need to carry out. Now, here's what I say to that in terms of the shades of gray with Jon Moxley. He can say it hurts him to do that. He could say he doesn't want to. And that's where I think he's lying. That's where I think he's manipulative. What he is doing, he says he needs to do. But it also is going to give him rewards. The AEW World Championship. He could make it seem like he needs to be in possession of that for the greater good of AEW. For what an AEW champion should be. He could say, I don't even want to have this role, but I have to have this role. The manipulation from a top heel is saying that. When the truth is, of course he wants to be AEW champion. Who wouldn't want to be AEW champion? He could make it seem like it's something else in the checklist of the goals that they need to accomplish to make AEW and the environment what they want it to be. But the beauty of it is he can disguise what he truly wants by saying, it didn't have to be this way. I don't want to do this. I have to do it. You have to do it because you want the AEW championship. That's how I would interpret a clear and obvious heel talking about the whole situation, trying to almost be a martyr about it. I wish I didn't have to, but I do. Does that match up with Jon Moxley's mentality like we've ever seen him before? No. Jon Moxley always wants to fight. Jon Moxley wants to bleed. He wants to make you bleed. All of a sudden now he doesn't want to carry things out that could be too violent. Yes, he does. But the manipulation of a leader like he is telling Bryan Danielson, telling Wheeler Yuta, telling even Claudio and Pac and Marina, I'm just doing what I have to do. Have to and want to seem to be intersecting, even if Moxley's not acknowledging that. And I say all that, and I come back to that plastic bag over Bryan Danielson's head, and I think about how much Moxley has said and the mission statement and what needs to be done, and immediately taking aim for Bryan Danielson. And I wonder out loud, is there any way that Moxley can lose on Saturday? I thought back to the promos Bray Wyatt would cut. I thought that Bray, in his cult leader-esque backwoods Wyatt family gimmick, he would say a lot, and he would have people following him, whether it be Harper or Braun Strowman or Rowan or the fans. But at some point, it became a bunch of nonsense because he would never win a big feud. Cena, Undertaker. And then his words just become BS. And you have to be careful with that, because then his promos got rambling because no one was listening. Well, cool, but he doesn't win in the end. And I thought that was booking malpractice as it related to the Wyatt family. Bray should have won more. They should have stood tall far more often. They needed to win big feuds. You have to put an up-and-coming group over and consistently over, and you have to do it against talent that are already over. It didn't happen with the Wyatt family. It should have. You know who it's happened with? It's happened with Gunther. That's the difference. That's how you build a star. That's how you build a group. So I come back to that and say, if all of Moxley's words don't turn into something, then they're just words. When you start an angle and a new group off as hot as they did, and by hot, I mean lightning rod of people talking of, oh my God, they put a bag over somebody's head. I don't think you can lose 2 months later. Not even 2 months later. He beat Darby. I have no problem with using the entire group to beat Darby. If they're carrying out a mission. You want to say it protects Darby? Sure. You want this group, at least from, this is me reading the tea leaves. You want this group to be looked at as dangerous. You don't want them to be cool. You don't want them to get anything close to a cheer. You want people to fear them and hate them. I say you put people up against Kofi Kingston, against Rey Mysterio, when you want them to be heels. If you want a group or a person to be treated as a heel and to not like them, you point them in the direction of Bryan Danielson. You point them in the direction of Bryan Danielson, knowing his career could end at any time, his full-time career, and you do so in Washington, where he's from. I did not expect. I've laid out a lot of other things that I would have done with Bryan Danielson in his career, not knowing his schedule or what's going to happen. I would have done initially him and Darby at Grand Slam. I would have had Swerve waiting in the wings and done the rematch, assuming that Swerve would win the title back and Danielson goes into semi-retirement. They didn't do that. I'm willing to see where it's going to go. Swerve's going to be back at Wrestle Dream. But is now Bryan Danielson going to be in the spot where, because he's a beloved underdog, babyface, hometown champion, if you decimate him on Saturday in the main event of Wrestle Dream and you don't give the happy ending, and Moxley's group destroys him and perhaps does something on par or even worse than the bag, well, then you've used what could be the end of Bryan Danielson's full-time in-ring career to make this group exactly what you need it to be. Everybody else in AEW should have to fear that group. They haven't had anything like this before. They've had big heel groups. You've had Inner Circle. You've had Pinnacle. House of Black has been heels. Or are heels or whatever. This is different. This is something that everybody in the company should be worried about. This is something everybody in the company should be scared about. And it would build down the road to someone unseating them and knocking them off that perch. That already appears to be in the works for Darby Allin. Darby can get back there in a couple of months or 6 months. But I think if you want this group to be money-drawing heels, and I think AEW might be in a spot right now where they need people to chase. You got to get behind babyfaces to knock this group off the top. There may be more money in a babyface chasing, or multiple babyfaces chasing this group that will do anything it takes to carry out their mission. I don't know if I want Bryan Danielson's full-time in-ring career to be over just yet, but it may have to be for the sake of this new group. And we don't know when he would pop up again or anything like that. But maybe you sacrifice, and maybe this was always the plan, Bryan Danielson, his AEW World Championship, and you do so where he's from. And you make everything that people would love about him, everything that would get people excited about him, everybody who's going to be in that crowd pulling for him, you pull that rug out from him and you pull it hard. And you change everything. I don't see how this group, and most importantly, Jon Moxley, can eat a loss. Just based on everything they've done so far. And maybe that's Bryan Danielson walking away. Maybe that's also Bryan Danielson not getting a chance to walk away. And that's something I would sell. That's what I would sell on commentary. We knew Bryan Danielson would walk away when he won the AEW title. And tonight, he doesn't even get a chance to walk away because of what has been done to him by Jon Moxley, Claudio Castagnoli, Marina Shafir, and Pac. There is a cool darkness. There is a darkness enveloping AEW. And Jon Moxley's at the forefront of it, off the air. Now, Bryan Danielson's not going to be done on Saturday. You could put him away for a while and you could do his semi-retirement, and maybe he's the one who endorses Darby down the road. Washington guys. But now you start pointing other baby faces in their direction. I feel like it has to be. I feel like it has to be. And if not, does Danielson win by like a roll-up and then they beat the hell out of him after? I guess they can go in that direction. You don't want a 50-50 book it, though. If you're going to book Moxley strong, book him strong. I don't think it would matter as much to that group if he lost and they beat Danielson down after. And no, he didn't get to stand tall at the end of the night even though he won. But they still won the battle. No, I don't like a schmoz. I think he should just lose. It even hurts me to say that. But I think for the greater good of AEW, I think this group needs to be dangerous as hell. And I think they have to take out Bryan Danielson again and do so in a much bigger way on Saturday. The open challenge from Darby Allin to the AEW locker room has quickly become a match I am more invested in than I thought I would be, because they have not gone the typical route of an open challenge. They throw out the open challenge. You think someone's going to show up on the show. Instead, Darby throws it out again over the weekend, and Brody King takes him out. So challenge answered. Now, you get a week to build that. Just how the schedule goes. You get a week to make me care about a guy who's basically been in a faction, who hasn't had many chances to talk, who seems to get over and grab the crowd's attention because of his look and the hoo, all of that, but hasn't been given a lot of singles opportunities to really run with. And instead, they have been able to make the personal connection with words. Brody King has never really been put in that spot. And Darby, and I don't know how this came about or, who booked the segment or whatever, but Darby gave me a story on Brody King and told me more about who he was and gave me their past. And this is not your typical House of Black sticks together and this is our target. We're going after them and blah, blah. No, instead, this is Brody stepping out on his own. Darby detailing their history. Not that it was bad, that it was quite good, in fact. Saying everything he does for the company. Saying what he's willing to do and throwing it in Brody's face as if to say, hey, I know you want this. And Brody admits it. And right there, you've established a bigger issue between the two of them. This is no longer just an open challenge, and this is no longer just about a good wrestling match. Now I care more than I ever have before about a Brody King match in AEW. Brody did a great job. I love Darby sticking to who he is. What are we waiting for? What are we doing? Let's go. Come on, hit me. And Brody wants to and saying get up, and then he does. Darby's going to have that, I don't give a shit. I don't care if I'm going to get beat up. I don't care if I'm going into a fight I shouldn't go into. He talked about that last week with the whole stabbing thing that he talked. No. I got to do this. I am hard-headed. I'm probably a bit foolish, but I'll never back down. And there is something about that has got some magnetism to him. It's why I think people like Darby. There is the obvious connection and comparison that is easy to make, and I think fair to make, with Jeff Hardy. There is that daredevil nature to Darby Allin that people like. Inside the ring and outside the ring and off the everything. You name it, that's who he is. The face paint, all of it. He is such a unique character. But he's gotten better on the mic. He has embraced what he is within the company. And I think he makes you sit up and take notice. And last night on Dynamite, his back and forth with Brody King made me sit up and take notice. Because a lot of what he said was the truth. I don't love hearing him go, well, I do the media stuff and all that. But, that's a little pulling back the curtain. But it's also saying, hey, listen, I know what it takes to make it in this industry. I'm willing to put myself out there. Maybe he was saying it more that way. Put yourself out there, Brody. See what happens. Oh, and in terms of putting yourself out there, let's fight right now. Let's go ahead and do that. By doing what they did last night, I have gone from a week ago going, well, they want to heat Darby back up because he just lost to Moxley. They'll throw him somebody at Wrestle Dream to get him on the card and get him a big win. To 1 week later going, well, now that they've put story behind it, and now I know a little bit more about Brody King's motivations, this is not an obvious win for Darby anymore. Now I wonder if they're going to get a couple out of this, because I do kind of want to see that, because it would be a big win for Brody King. Darby's going to be fine. Maybe this helps launch Brody King a little bit. And it's once again Darby biting off more than he can chew. And they can play that. They can play that up. We've seen this. I could hear Tony Schiavone saying that. I really admire everything Darby Allin stands for and what he's willing to. But sometimes he bites off more than he can chew. And it's hurting him. And it's slowing him down. You could have Schiavone say, I've seen Darby backstage, how much you can see the wounds of war on his body and how he walks. I've seen a lot here, guys. Maybe Darby just needs to step back and slow down for a little bit and let Darby use that as motivation in the promo. Let him talk. Let him go right up to commentary and say that to Tony Schiavone. You're going to doubt me? Tony, you've seen everything. You've seen everything here in the last 5 years, and you've seen everything in pro wrestling. Why are you doubting me? It's part of Darby's story now. It's part of how you continue to get people behind him on that journey to Moxley. That should be months and months away. I have no problem with commentary, and this is how important commentary is. Selling up the fact that Darby has taken on too much at times. That Darby can't say no. And that he is perhaps a glutton for punishment. And that if he continues down this path, will he be in the shape that he needs to be in to strive in AEW for much longer? Tell that story. Say he bit off more than he could chew, perhaps, because of his mentality of never stopping. It gives him a little bit of an out if Brody beats him. And it's a big win for Brody. And let's see where he can go. But if you tell the story of, man, Darby just 2 weeks shy of what he dealt with Moxley and losing, and all of a sudden he's got to get back in there with Brody King. Oh, my goodness. And he can lose that way. And you give Brody a big win. And you do, like I said, the stuff with Shivani. You have something. I think there is something very special in Darby Allin. And the more I think about it, it'll be more special for him to get that first AEW World Championship by conquering a big heel. He should be the one to beat Jon Moxley. It'll be a bigger moment. He will have gone through much more. And it closes the circle on what happened a couple of weeks ago. I am far more invested in an open challenge in 1 week's time. You don't always need a month. You don't always need 6 months. When given the time and making the most of your minutes, you can make people care. Darby and Brody made me care about that match being more than an open challenge. And I think it opened up a lot of possibilities for both men. Let's talk about the state of the women's division in AEW. I think it's in terms of depth and television readiness, the best in wrestling. I think there are more TV-ready performers and wrestlers in AEW than anywhere else. And I say that because look, Cora Jade even mentioned it on NXT last night. Oh, I keep hearing it's the deepest division and all that. And they have a lot of women in NXT. And they have more prospects, female prospects in NXT than they do male prospects. And I get why they get all the TV time. I totally endorse it. You put the best people on TV. You put the people that have the biggest chance. NXT is still developmental. So it's deep. They're just not totally ready yet. And that's fine. But I look at AEW, and I look at the landscape right now. Whether it was the plan or not, Willow and Chris go from feuding with each other to now being pointed at the two women's titles in AEW. And I want to get to what I saw with Chris and Mercedes and Camille. But with Willow, we start there because, as Tony Khan announced yesterday, Britt couldn't travel because she was sick. And her match with Willow to determine Mariah May's next challenger was turned into a four-way. And as a result, Willow still wins. Pretty good match, by the way. I know, kind of thrown together, but pretty good match. So now she gets Mariah May. And Mariah, I think, has needed someone the caliber of Willow. She needs someone to play off of. She needs someone who's kind of the opposite of her and doesn't act like her in any way, shape, or form. She should be positioned and pointed right at a big-time fan favorite. But I like that the physicality of Mariah keeps her dangerous, that headbutt. But, and this is the progression of Willow as a character that we've seen over the last year, there were elements of Willow that were very similar to Hugger Bailey. And Hugger Bailey didn't evolve quickly enough. And then you get catastrophes like that kendo stick match with Alexa Bliss, where she's just not mean enough. And obviously she turns heel and things change, and she changed up her whole gimmick. But Willow has evolved. Willow's been in street fights. Willow might be the nice, bubbly personality, but she also knows she can't be that way all the time. And sometimes you got to go get your opponent. You got to go say some things. You got to go fight. You got to attack. You can't just be happy, smiley, and bubbly all the time. And she did that last night. She got one back on Mariah. She had a busted lip. She looked like she got messed up and then gave Mariah her receipt. Mariah will beat her on Saturday, as she should. But it's a much better opponent for Mariah to really get her footing as the AEW Women's World Champion. Whether that was supposed to be Britt or not, who knows? You would assume Britt could be next. And then you have Mercedes and Camille apparently now dealing with Statlander, who, for whatever reason, was just separated from Stokely with no explanation. You can't defend that. I don't get it. Give me a breakup. Give me her getting mad at him. I think that would have been, if you're calling her a babyface, which if you put her up against Camille and Mercedes, that's what's going to happen. Chris always had fans. It's just that you had her with Stokely or you pointed her at Willow, and there's more reason to boo her. But there is always going to be people that back Chris Statlander. So it wasn't hard, and it wouldn't have been hard to turn her back babyface with a little more explanation. Let Stokely try to take too much control of her, and she gets tired of it, and she cuts him loose. They didn't do that. There's no reason to harp on it anymore. It's been talked about enough. It's in the past. You move on. He's doing stuff with Private Party, it seems like now. But now we've had a couple of instances, or more so what really happened last night, where I think they may have found something. I like heel world champions putting obstacles in the way of their potential opponents. MJF was always great at that. Did it with Ospreay. Did it in his title reign when he was a heel in his title reign. Ric Flair did it all the time. Roman did it. You're not getting to me that easily. You're going to battle for it. Mercedes has that. She has that standing right next to her and towering over her in Camille. It's a very simple comparison. And I know Camille has worked plenty before AEW, and we've seen her work in AEW. But I have always looked at the Mercedes and Camille pairing similar to how I looked at Shawn Michaels and Diesel. Shawn does all the work. Diesel protects him, helps him keep championships, helps him win matches. But that's his primary position. That's his primary role until, of course, Diesel would work more and got out going on his own. Now, they have never hidden the fact that Camille is a wrestler and has wrestled, and hell, she worked over the weekend. But why not get more out of that? Why not lean into the fact that people got excited for Chris and Camille to face off last night? It's a very different look than we've seen before. Two dominant-looking women with size and strength and height facing off is not the typical. We haven't seen that in AEW, really. Not at this level. And the crowd was into it last night. And I kind of looked and went, oh, there's something here. I don't think you have to rush to Statlander and Mercedes. I think you make a point, and I wouldn't even rush to Statlander and Camille. I would do this a couple more times. I would have a couple more interactions. I would take the temperature. Have them fight a little. Don't let them get too much. Does the crowd want to see more? Can you ignite those flames and have a big pull apart and put security there? I would think about that. I would do that a couple more times where they have interaction, not too much, and you get a sense of the crowd. Are they into the idea of Statlander and Camille? Do we take it away from them 2, 3, 4 times so they're thirsty for it, so they want to see it, so we have to do it? If that is the case, you stretch out the whole feud. Statlander has to get by Camille to get to Mercedes. Maybe she doesn't the first time around. Maybe Mercedes helps a little bit, and you get Camille a big, huge win. And if you do it in a 2-on-1 situation, it doesn't hurt Statlander. And you have that covered by, Tony Khan or Christopher Daniels of, hey, we saw what happened here. They're going to do it again, and you put a stip on it or whatever. Or Mercedes is bad from ringside, and Chris can get her win back. But you could take your time on that. You could build this up a little bit. So when Statlander does defeat Camille, you go right to Mercedes' face, and she has the concern. Uh-oh, I'm in trouble. You completely reestablished Chris Statlander as a credible babyface, even though she just came off a feud where she won as a heel. But you get all of that behind her. We get to see Camille in the ring. We get to present something that's different than what we've seen. We stretch out the feud that should end up getting us to Statlander and Mercedes. And Camille now comes off as more of a threat than just the tall one who stands next to Mercedes. She could have, for the time being, her first signature win or match in AEW. And you get a lot more out of this feud. Bubbling under the surface, you have Deonna Purrazzo and Taya Valkyrie putting together, so far, a 2-person tandem. Now, it's another heel group. So where's their babyface? Because you also have Athena as the ROH Women's World Champion, and she's a heel. So right now, across the board for the women, on top are a lot of heels. You probably need a babyface champion in there somewhere. But Mariah's new, and you're not beating Mercedes yet. But I think they have some good things bubbling up there. And you see what happens, obviously, with Britt. And when she comes back, when she gets back, where she fits into the equation. But they have some pieces to play with. And I think if they can lean into Mercedes, look, I know she can work. I don't know if she's had that unreal match yet in AEW. She's had some good ones, and she's had some ones that I think have let people down. But if she is this CEO and she's amazing and she always has an entourage, play into it. Make her hard to get to. Let her be insulated. Let her be more of a chicken shit babyface. Lean into that as much as you can. Get her a clear response. And let Stat be the one to overcome that. But have it take time. And in the meantime, establish Camille as more than just a tall heater. They got something there with that. I'll tell you that right now. A couple other little things from Dynamite. Jeff Jarrett on commentary, just adding to his resume. There was something I noticed, and sometimes you find this out for fun and by mistake. I will say Mariah continues to do well on the mic. And I loved Mariah's interaction with Jeff Jarrett. And her pushing his buttons and her saying, whose world is it? And you know what the setup was. Well, it's my world, but that's for another time. And she kept asking where Karen was. and kept asking, is she in the car? Like prodding her. And I went, I don't know if this was planned. I don't know if that's her working on her feet, which is great. But then I went, ooh, Mariah versus Karen and Jarrett on the mic. That could be pretty fun. There could be something to that. What if Karen finds someone that she can manage to go up against Mariah, just to get Mariah versus Karen on promos? It feels like something that would play into Mariah's strengths. I think when she hits a home run with her verbiage and her talking, when she gets it, she hits a home run. Like, I think she's very good in that way. She would have quite the verbal jousting with Karen Jarrett. And I wonder if maybe they stumbled upon that last night with the commentary. Get a couple of comments here. Nerdy Dude says, for me, Chris Statlander never was a heel. She was more of a tweener. And he also says that Athena is not a heel. She's a great tweener. She's a heel. She's supposed to be a heel. She's really good in it. Sitting Local noted that we got a low-key Penelope Ford return too. Yeah. I'm a little surprised that they put Hayter in that spot. And remember, Jamie Hayter was not in that match last night, initially. You know, her and Nyla and Saraya were added to the match, or became the replacements for Britt. So I don't know when they were going to get to Penelope and Jamie, but they went to that last night. I happen to think, and I'll answer another one. Rob's here says, Matt, outside of the obvious names, who is some of the women you believe are bubbling up in AEW's most TV ready to make a bigger splash? Jamie Hayter's done it already, but I think they have something very big there that they just need to slow build. I'm going to talk more about that later on this week. But I think they have something very special in Jamie Hayter. I'm a big Queen Aminata fan. I think she brings a lot to the table. Athena and Billy Starks are a fun team. I don't know why it's completely limited to Ring of Honor, where everybody else in Ring of Honor that's a champion seems to float around. That might be intentional. But there's something there, and you see what happens at Deonna and Taya. You need more baby faces, I'll tell you that. I mean, it feels that way, and obviously you have Britt, and Sheeta has been a baby face, more heel lately. That seems to flip around as they need to, but they have it. I mean, they have plenty of people who can work. I'm a big Harley Cameron fan. I think she's hilarious. I think she's in the right role. How much longer she stays in that, I don't know, but there's someone who makes a lot of her time and her minutes. There is a similar chaotic energy to Chelsea Green. And that's a big compliment, believe me. Not saying they're the same, but there is something to that. Rob, shout out to all along with family going through this. Yes, everybody out there that's dealing with the hurricane that's been displaced. I know the NXT talent did not fly back to Florida if they live there, and I know a lot of people are trying to get. Please be careful. Please be safe. Take it seriously. I've unfortunately been displaced by a hurricane, not in a major way, but I've had people very close to me. I lived in a town in southern New Jersey years back where I had to evacuate for days, and 5 minutes up the road from where I lived, it was devastation. The president and governor were 5 minutes from my house when I lived in Brigantine, New Jersey. And God, this is 5, 6, 7 years ago now, I guess, 8 years ago. And I watched people go through something they didn't deserve to go through and what the hurricane can do. So please be safe as you can be. Take all the precautions that you can, and certainly thinking of everybody out there. And if you're watching and going through that and we can provide any kind of distraction, certainly happy to do so. So thinking of everybody out there going through that, and I appreciate everybody joining me today. As I said, we're going to go live again right after this on a new stream for Matt members. to break down NXT. So we're going to jump right into NXT a couple minutes after this is over for the Matt members. Become a Matt member at thewrestlingmatchshow.com. Hit the join button down below. If you're listening in the podcast form, thank you for doing that. If you haven't subscribed to the podcast, please do that. And if you're listening via podcast, make sure you head over to thewrestlingmatchshow.com, subscribe to the YouTube channel, think about becoming a Matt member. For everybody that is listening and wants to hear more about NXT and you're not a Matt member, it will go up in our normal Thursday time slot of 1 p.m. Eastern for everybody here on the WrestlingMatchShow.com and on the podcast page. But for the Matt members, you're going to get it live in just a matter of minutes after we finish this stream up here. And this episode, as Nerdy Dude said, buy that merch, ProWrestlingTees.com/TheWrestlingMat. Be like Nerdy Dude. Send us a picture when you get the merch. If you're wearing it, that's cool. If you just want to show it off, that's cool. But please make sure you send it to us on all social media, Wrestling Matt 23 and The Matt Camp. We really appreciate your support. If you are a Matt member, you get discounts on that merch. So make sure you go check that out. All right. Coming up, we'll be up in probably 5 to 10 minutes or so. Put the notifications on so you don't miss that stream. If you're a Matt member, go to thewrestlingmatchshow.com to be a Matt member. I'll be back in a couple minutes for the Matt members. But right there's what you see. $2.99 a month gets you in. $6.99 gets you those members-only videos, like the one you're going to be getting very soon. And the Matt event at $24.99 a month gets you all of the perks. We're going to set up that private Zoom for this month. We're going to do that private past wrestling event watch party. We'll connect with you on social media. So plenty of ways to get in. Love to connect with everybody, but supporting the show as a Matt member helps us that much more, allows us to produce that much more content for you, and allows you to get a bonus episode coming up in a matter of minutes. For the Matt members, I'll see you soon, and for everybody else, I'll be back tomorrow to talk about wrestling even more right here on the Wrestling Mat.